This is J-Man with MusicMarauders.com here with David Gans at Coyotes in Denver, Colorado. How's it going, David?
Very well, thank you. I just finished doing a radio show,
Yeah.
and now I'm getting ready to set up and sound check and play a gig here with Melvin Seals and JGB.
Awesome.
And with Moon Alice.
Cool. How did Tales from the Golden Road originate?
Well, I started working for Sirius XM's Grateful Dead channel when they first started it up. They hired me as a consultant to help them figure out what to do with their 24/7, 365 channel. And I actually didn't suggest this, although I had some ideas it would be fun to do interactive radio. I guess it was 6 or so months into the existence of the channel that they came up with an idea of doing what they thought of as kind of a roundtable show, where we'd assemble little panels of experts and stuff like that. But it quickly turned into a much simpler and much more enjoyable format of calling in, a talk show.
Sure.
And I recruited my dear friend and colleague Gary Lambert, who has one of the most amazing memories of anybody I've ever known, not just for Grateful Dead stuff, music stuff in general, theater, movies, television. He's just a pop cultural encyclopedia and an incredibly sweet guy. And so we started, I don't remember. Yeah, it must have been about like February of 2008. I think that's when the channel went live in 2007. It all runs together after a while. But we started sometimes with like theme shows and what would you do, or did you have this kind of experience at a show, things like that. But it quickly just turned into a much more interesting kind of free-form thing. I mean, we'll have some subject matter from time to time.
Right.
Like today, the show I just finished, we had Donna Jean Godshell Band.
Yeah, I heard that.
Live in the studio with Jeff Mattson and stuff. So they played songs live, and then we took calls in between, and she took calls. And it was a lot of fun. But usually it's just general interest, tell us a story kind of stuff. And with further out on the road now, it's kind of fun to be getting on-site reports from people waiting to get into the show again like they used to in the old days.
Sure. It's a pretty unique concept to the Dead community, a national radio broadcast, forum like that.
And
it's a really cool idea.
And I've thought about it recently because, a couple weeks ago we got the word that Owsley Stanley had died. And I was able to get on the air and talk about how important he was to our culture on every level, including the fact that we could say without censorship that, he turned the world on to LSD and that wasn't a bad thing.
Right.
I don't think you could go on network television and say that.
Yeah, I don't
so
think
I like
so.
the fact that we have an uncensored channel where we can talk about the stuff that really matters to Deadheads, and one of those things is LSD.
Right.
It's not like I'm advocating drug use,
but it's a part of the culture and the history.
Yeah, and the Grateful Dead was forged in a crucible of LSD and a tremendously open-minded collection of musicians.
Absolutely.
So we could talk about that and talk about how Owsley, how important that was to him.
Absolutely. What drew you to Dead music originally, and what
My
do you?
songwriting partner and roommate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. In 1972, he'd been trying to get me to listen to the Grateful Dead for a long time. And the funny thing is, I looked at the albums and the song titles on there, and I saw there was a song called Ripple, and there was a song called New Speedway Boogie, and there was a song called Cumberland Blues, and I thought, well, I'm not a big fan of the blues, and I certainly think boogie music is no fun at all. I was a serious, folk rock kind of guy.
Sure.
And the notion that there was a song called Boogie on there, and Ripple I thought was a song about cheap wine. Well, imagine what a schmuck I realized I was when I heard what those songs actually sounded like, and found out that Cumberland Blues wasn't a blues.
Right, goes quite beyond
New
the
Speedway
title.
Boogie wasn't really a boogie, and Ripple wasn't about cheap wine. So after actually going to a show heavily under the influence of LSD, I'll have you know, I soon got my definitions recalibrated.
Your bearings kind of straight. Yeah. What was your first Dead show?
It was March 5th, 1972 at Winterland.
Cool.
And then the next time they came through and played in the Bay Area, I went to 4 shows in a row in the Berkeley Community Theater.
Nice.
As a Goddard.
What era of Dead music do you connect with and enjoy the most personally?
I don't always answer that question the
Okay,
same way.
that's fair.
because really, the Grateful Dead were several different bands over the course of their existence. The one that I connected with at first, in '72, is what I call the Americana Jam Band edition of the Grateful Dead. The one that, if you listen to the album Europe '72, that's the band you'll hear, and that's the band that I really think is sort of the most amazing edition of it. But I think everybody who becomes a Deadhead has a particular fondness for the era that they were, when they jumped on the bus, right? And there are people. By the time I went to see the Dead in '72, Pigpen, I only saw him that one time. By the next time I saw him, he was no longer touring with the band. And so it was really the sort of Americana band with the country rock kind of stuff, and Bob Weir ascended as a songwriter and co-band leader. That really was the band that I first connected with. And, I mean, I have a tremendous appreciation for the earlier era with Pigpen, and that sort of more feral, psychedelic, folk, Baroque stuff they were doing, in the earlier days. But I just don't think there's a show from '73 or '74 or '72 that you could listen to and not be impressed with. But, they were a little more consistent by then and still quite adventurous. And had not turned into the somewhat more conservative kind of arena rock band that they became in the Brent Midland era in the '80s and '90s.
What do you find to be the most fascinating aspect of the Grateful Dead culture or community?
Oh, that's a tough question. So many things about it are so wonderful. I mean, many of the greatest people I've ever known are people I know through that world and that culture, and musicians and fans and professional people. Maybe that's the thing about it that makes it the most wonderful, is the tremendous variety of, and the power and the size and the persistence of that culture. Jerry Garcia has been dead for 15 years and change, and there are still Deadheads. There are still newly minted Deadheads, and people coming on board who are finding that music and becoming tremendously well versed in it because there's so much of it available. You can hear all that music that they made, and
most of it's on the archive.
Yeah,
so
and
readily
you can
available.
listen to it anytime, and you can play that music with other people. Grateful Dead music became a genre, a musical language, in the same way that jazz and bluegrass and Dixieland. There's all these kinds of music where you can walk into a room with a bunch of people you've never met before and play those songs with them because there's a vocabulary and a syntax and
they're almost on par with
style.
Traditional music. Some of the
It
traditions.
is a new tradition.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that there would be like a Sirius radio channel dedicated specifically to the Grateful Dead?
People would say that to me when I was doing my syndicated radio show. People would say, "Man, you should try and start it." And when satellite radio started, people would say, "You should try and start it." 24/7 Grateful Dead channel. I don't want to do that. It's all I got to come up with an hour a week, and that's plenty.
Right.
And then the next thing I know, I get this phone call saying, "Hey, they're starting a 24/7 Grateful Dead channel, and we want you to be a consultant on it." And I went, "Oh, okay. Well, here's what you got to have: complete concerts,
Absolutely,
and you got to have this, that, and the other thing." And so I recruited David Lemieux to do the This Day in Grateful Dead History thing, and brought Gary Lambert in and Rob Bleedstein to help curate the concerts and make sure that we have nothing but first-rate concerts. And there are complete Grateful Dead concerts 3 times a day on the channel.
That's great.
And I didn't really want to be shoveling Grateful Dead music out there in that way, which is why an hour a week was kind of cool for me. I would do an interview, I would take a really good show and break it up over several weeks. There's always new Dead-related stuff coming out and all. But, obviously there are a lot of people that want to hear Grateful Dead, and to have a 24/7 channel.
The demand is there.
Anytime they want, and I'm very, very happy to be part of it. And I get to produce concerts and send them in, and introduce them on the air and explain why this one's worth listening to and things like that.
Right.
And there's a huge library of recorded stuff available. So just when there's not a special program on it, it's just like the jukebox of Grateful Dead.
Right.
there's a huge variety of stuff. It goes from a Garcia Grisman thing to a Bob Weir, Bobby and the Midnights track, and then there's a track from a 1967 Grateful Dead show, and then there's a track from a 1983 Grateful Dead show, and it really gives you a sense of the great variety of music that came through that lens into our world.
Well, as a fan, I want to thank you for everything you've contributed to my knowledge of the Grateful Dead, and my repertoire.
It's been a privilege.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Can you just name a couple of your favorite Grateful Dead shows off the top of your head?
Again, this list changes depending on when you ask me, but 5/19/74 is a show that I attended in Portland and had an amazing jam in the middle of it, and it was one of the first things I went for when I had access to the vault. I went and got that one out to listen to because it was such an important show in my own personal canon. You can hardly go wrong with any show from '74. I mean, the band was just playing on such a high level and such great audio quality. The wall of sound just delivered such incredible clarity. So those tapes are always great to listen to.
Right. Which the wall of sound and their Owsley contribution.
Yes, and the Fillmore East 1971, April '71 run is all full of great stuff. The Fillmore West, February 27th, 28th, March 1st and 2nd, '69 that brought us Live Dead. Anything again from Europe '72 is going to be great. I can't wait to hear this complete Europe '72 tour when it's released later this year.
Are they doing? They're doing a release of that?
Oh yeah. Go look at dead.net, and they are. Right now, it's being mixed and mastered. Every show, 22 complete shows are being put out in one big box, and it's going to be like 70. I think I heard yesterday it's actually going to be 73 discs.
Wow.
Because they don't want to break up any of the jams, and they want to have everything in sequence. So it's going to be 22 complete shows from an absolute peak of the band's creativity.
Yeah.
I wrote the liner notes for 3 of the shows, and I was just up at the mastering lab in Boulder yesterday talking with David Glasser at Air Show Mastering. He's mastering the whole run of shows. And it's great for him. He's a Deadhead just like us. He saw his first show in 1970, and now he gets to work on this great project of peak Grateful Dead. So we were just sitting there in his lab listening to this amazing audio, just being thrilled that we get to be a part of it.
That's really cool. You've got to be really proud and really excited to be a part of everything you've been leading up to this point in the big Grateful Dead community.
It's been a great. I never planned any of it. I was a journalist and a musician, and somehow managed to wander into a book deal, and that led to appearing on a radio show and doing more radio, and the next thing I knew, without ever planning to, that became my day job. And 26 years later, it's been my day job for all this time. And a huge privilege. And occasionally I struggle here and there, but really just to be able to present that music to people and turn people onto it, to have found a way to put Grateful Dead music on the air free for nothing for more than a quarter of a century is just a ridiculous bit of good luck.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your contributions to the community and all of your insight. Like I said, you've been a big influence and helped all of us, some of us newcomers to the scene, and finding some of that really, really important, essential Grateful Dead music.
Well, thanks for having me on this webcast.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I hope you'll check out my music too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm here to play my own performance, and I do a few Grateful Dead songs, and I do a lot of songs that are sort of derived from my experience in the Grateful Dead world.
You do a lot of looping and stuff too.
Yes,
don't you?
I do.
Yeah. How did you get into looping and all that?
Well, that was a matter of being out on the road as a solo performer and looking for ways to expand my musical presentation. And I started hearing about these devices that allowed you to record a little bit of what you're playing and then play along with it. And for a folk singer or songwriter type guy like me, that meant I could play a solo in the middle of a song. Right? So I bought the first one I bought was a Line 6, this green thing, but it only had like 28 seconds of sampling time, and it wasn't long enough to record the entire set of changes for a song. So the next thing I got was a Boss loop station, or C20, and that had enough storage space to record, a whole chorus and verses of a song. So I started being able to play solos and stuff in my songs. But once I had this amazing tool on the floor in front of me, I realized I could create compositions with it. So I started doing improvisations with the looping device.
Mm-hmm.
And it just opened up huge horizons. And now I have about half a dozen pieces that they're composed in the sense that they are collections of musical gestures that I use. Like one of them, of most interest to this audience, would be Cassidy's Cat. And
Mm-hmm.
it starts by playing a rhythm guitar figure taken from Cassidy. And then I start introducing melodic ideas from China Cat Sunflower, Birdsong,
That's interesting.
and Dark Star, and occasionally bits of Saint Stephen. And so it's kind of a fantasia of all of these Grateful Dead little nuggets of melody that I've intertwined.
It's really
But the
neat.
thing, it's improvisational because the order in which you introduce the pieces can be different.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I'll do, a harmonized line. I'll play a line from China Cat Sunflower and then play a line that harmonizes with it. So it's built of the same melodic gestures every time, but it comes out very different every time. And sometimes it'll go for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little shorter, and sometimes it'll roll into another song, and sometimes it'll just. Sometimes I'll end a set by walking off the stage and leaving
it going.
playing,
Yeah,
right?
nice touch. Yeah, I saw you a couple times down at the Spirit of Swanee Music Park, and really enjoyed what you did. And I mean, obviously, in that environment, it makes everything more euphoric too. So.
I wish I was there this weekend, actually.
Yeah,
Springfest
same
is
here.
happening right now.
Same here. That's actually the first time I saw you was down at Springfest, I think, in like 05 or 06.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always enjoyed playing down there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate your time today, and it was a pleasure meeting you, and thanks for doing this with us. David Gans, and do you want to say your website?
dgans.com, DGANS.com, and you'll find links to my music, to photography, to books and articles that I've published, and a blog also, where I post interesting and annoying bits of news.
Well, thanks for your time, David. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.